This is USCHO Weekend Review. And here is your host, Ed Trefsker.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, November 17th, 2025. This episode is brought to you by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Las Vegas. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 for tickets. I'm Ed Trefsker alongside Jim Connolly and Derek Schooley. And, well, once again, we've got a couple of hot teams to talk about. First of all, Dartmouth, they're 6-0-0, surprising a lot of people right out of the gate. They swept the North Country Tour against St. Lawrence and Clarkson 6-1 and 3-1, respectively. And that's never an easy road trip for anybody in the league. But it's the first time they've swept both teams on a trip up north since 17-18. And it's the first 6-0 start since 1957-58, even before I was born. So they are off to a terrific beginning.
You know, the funny thing is when you said 17-18, I was thinking like the year 17-18, not 2007. I'm thinking Dartmouth's played hockey that long? But no, that would be an impressive stat. But no, the one thing I was impressed with when I did some research on this, 1 goal a game for their last 5 games. That is, and then even the game before that, 2. So if you're looking at it, they've played 6 games and they've given up 7 goals. That is an impressive stat. That's lockdown defense right there.
You know, Ed might not have been alive, but, 1957, that was Eisenhower's administration. I mean, maybe that we can, find some similarities there. I don't know. I just feel like Dartmouth is doing a lot of the things that you have to do really well. They do some of the boring things well. They win faceoffs. They scored 3 shorthanded goals, 2 on the same penalty on Friday night against St. Lawrence. They are such a dangerous team. They lurk. They find ways to turn you over. They capitalize. They put pucks in the back of your net. I mean, they're not flashy. They don't have the high-end talent that you're going to see in some of the other schools we'll talk about, but they do everything really well. We'll talk a lot more about them this week, but I just look at this Dartmouth team now and say, if they cannot be the most positive and confident they've been in the last 2 decades in Hanover, I don't know what the problem would be. This is a team that should bring a lot of confidence back to Dartmouth.
But I'll go even a step further. You talk about boring things. You got a defense. Defense wins championships. And they're besides face-off goals, shorthanded goals, all this. I come back to the 5 straight games giving up 1 goal. And especially 2 goals on the road in North Country. Clarkson's been playing pretty good. And you got Emmett Croteau, a transfer from Clarkson, just going up there and just winning games.
One maybe a caveat in this, as an Ivy, they're still about 3 weeks behind everybody else in games. So they still have a few to get under their belt, but that doesn't take away from what they've accomplished.
No, I guess that's what probably makes this look a little, strange, off. Maybe it's too early to be celebrating, but this is a great start right now. And the way that Dartmouth is playing, the confidence they're playing with, I guess we'll find out if this is just a bunch of early season bounces, but I don't know if there's something in there that tells me that this isn't just good early season luck. This is a pretty good team.
And you're giving up only 120 shots. You've got 2 goalies splitting, you've given up 120 shots in 6 games. The save percentage of .945 between 2 goalies. They've split. Rowan Clark and Emmett Croteau. One's at .960, which is off the charts, and .923. And you've given up 120 shots. Pretty good.
And listen, 960 isn't sustainable for the entire season. To be somewhere even in that, stratosphere at this point is pretty impressive.
923 is really good.
I do wonder, it always makes me wonder whether or not we'll see one goaltender at some point this season, or will this be a platoon situation the entire year for recast?
Didn't we talk about that we've seen more big, we saw it this weekend with Ed, and we're going to talk about RIT, but both RIT and RMU, my team, have played one goalie all year. A lot of teams have.
Yeah.
You mentioned goaltending, though. Just overall stats, I was just taking a quick peek. The top 10 goaltenders in D1 right now who've played at least a third of their games are .935 save percentage and above. So there's some really, really good goaltending going on out there in general.
So you're saying that a 905 save percentage isn't going to lead the nation this year?
That might be below the midpoint. I don't know. We'll have to see how things go.
I think it would be.
Well, keeping a streak rolling is Michigan State. They lost their first game of the season to New Hampshire and haven't lost since. So they've won 9 in a row, including on the road this past weekend, 4-1 and 3-1 at Notre Dame. 52 shots stopped over the weekend by Trey Augustine, talking about goaltending. He got his 50th collegiate victory in that. So Michigan State, they're going to be, I think, probably, ballots are not all in, but probably unanimous number 1 for a second week in a row.
I just look at this team. They don't have a lot of holes right now. And when you're getting the goaltending they're getting, we just mentioned goaltending, but, with Trey Augustine, the way he's playing in net, they don't have a lot of holes. I just think he hit his 50th win, and he's not even at Christmas of his junior season. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I'm a little concerned with Notre Dame. They're trying to find their identity a little bit, going from Brock Sheehan, Jeff Jackson to Brock Sheehan. Brock Sheehan's a fabulous coach at Chicago Steel. He's a puck possession guy. They're trying to find the identity a little bit of where they are, and I think Notre Dame, they've got some really good players, Knuble and Danny Nelson and Mazzotti, and they're going to get somebody eventually, but they're just not there right now. And to them, Michigan State to go in there and do that to them, pretty good weekend for them. It's got to get better for Notre Dame sooner than later. It doesn't get easier in the Big Ten. They do have this weekend. They come out your way, Ed, Jimmy, and they say they get Merrimack, Boston College, but then they come home and get Wisconsin, who's been playing pretty well. You're going to see Notre Dame's got to turn it around pretty quickly here.
Well, that winning streak, 9 games, but they're not the only one with it. And the other team in the country with a 9-game winning streak, completely surprising people around Rochester, is RIT. They got swept the first weekend of the season, 1-0 and 6-1 to Sacred Heart. But since then, they've reeled off 9 straight, 3 of those outside of the conference, and the rest in Atlantic hockey. It's really quite a surprise. It was expected to be a real rebuilding year for the Tigers. They lost 2 seasons ago, 4 players to the portal, 2 more this year, and a new coach in Matt Thomas coming in. So it was expected it might be a little bit of a struggle to get things going, but they have been finding ways to win. And probably the one to put the most credit on is goaltender Jakub Kurbacek, who's been top 10 and was goalie of the month last month in Atlantic hockey.
One game, I think it's one game they've given up over 2 goals.
Yep.
I think that was the one game against Sacred Heart or
Air Force.
Where they won 7-3. We had 2 pretty quickly, and I thought that might have been the way that we were going to get. And we kept saying it was a race to 3 on going into the second game, and obviously it was, and they got the third one with 45 seconds left in the game. But really good hockey series. Big boy hockey, as I called it on my post game. They're big, they're heavy. I thought both teams played extremely hard. Came down to the final 3 minutes, both games. Unfortunately, they got a power play goal in the last, with about 3 minutes left on a disputed call, but I can't go there. And then we gave up one with 45 seconds left, but they found ways to win. I was impressed with them, but it's early, but they're the story of Atlantic hockey so far right now, just with reeling off 9 in a row. But it could have went either way, and I will take the solace of that. That's the only, I guess, when you got to walk out of there with some feeling good about yourself that you played as hard as you possibly did, but you got no points out of it. And good hockey team. Their goaltending was outstanding. They did a lot it's a completely different RIT hockey team, Ed, and maybe you can comment on that. It's not as freewheeling and run and gun. It's more of a straight line, east-west, simplistic, hard-nosed hockey team. And that's why I kind of use the word big boy hockey that both games were.
Well, coming into the season and even in his introductory press conference, first-year head coach Matt Thomas talked about that maybe they didn't have the talent level that they've had some years in the past, especially like an elite goal scorer, so that they were going to want to do things to play a little bit more defensively. And his point that he made early on is he said, we're not always going to be the most talented team on the ice, but we want to be the hardest working team every time. So that's been kind of the mantra. They've been working very hard in practice and all. So he's really set kind of his identity on the program very quickly.
I think there's also something you have to mention here is the fact that they're winning close games, especially this weekend. Take those two this weekend. You go on the road to I think that Robert Morris is a tough place to win. It has been for years. So you go on the road, you find yourself with the game in the balance back-to-back nights, and you find ways to win those games. Good teams find ways to win, and that's part of the championship resume. Now I think we have to ask ourselves, is this like a nice little Atlantic hockey run, or is RIT something besides just an Atlantic hockey front runner? Are they going to be in the at-large bid conversation for the entire season? You start putting streaks together like this, it's going to get, those wins pile up fast. And once you're over 20, 25 wins, I don't care what conference you're in, you're under consideration. You're going to be in the picture. So I think that that's what I'm looking at the most for RIT right now, whether or not this is going to be an NPI run, or is this just going to be something that we're talking about in Atlantic hockey.
The next 2 weeks are going to tell you. They play Tuesday night at Niagara, Friday night a single game at Bentley, Sunday morning hop on a bus to Toronto and fly to Dublin, and then play in the Friendship 4 in Belfast. And the Friendship 4, if you'd asked before the season, is this going to be a tough matchup among the teams, you might not have thought so. But Sacred Heart maybe has turned things around a bit. Miami is off to a terrific start, and Union is blowing the doors off of people. So that could turn out to be a much better tournament and a much higher level of competition than people may have thought.
You got to think about 3 of the 4 teams you just mentioned there, Miami, Union, and RIT, are teams that we have talked about on this podcast as teams that have been flying way too low under the radar. Well, you'll see them fly above the radar over in Belfast.
Well, with that, we're coming to the midpoint of the program. We'll take a pause. We're sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen 4, April 9th and 11th in Las Vegas.
I'm Cole Caulfield, and I played college hockey.
I'm Adam Fox, and I played college hockey.
I'm Jake Gensel, and I played college hockey.
I'm Kel McCarr, and I played college hockey.
Whether you're a fan or a player, nothing compares to college hockey.
We're back with USCHO Weekend Review. There were still some upsets over the weekend. One that really stood out was Vermont over Maine 2-1 after they lost 7-0 the night before. And Steve Wiedler was ecstatic in his post-game interview on ESPN+. But for the most part, it started to feel like things were leveling off. We haven't had as many upsets as we've had recently. And there could be a number of reasons with that. You're getting into conference play where teams better. Maybe the top 10 are getting settled in. Maybe teams in general are finding who's going to be the goalie and who's going to be the players to look at. And maybe we'll find out with today's poll. Maybe the voters are getting it right by mid-November. And I want to start there because, Jim, you and I both are among the 50 voters, whatever you want to call it, for the poll. And every week, it seems this year, has been a lot more work and a lot more comparing things to get a ballot together because Nobody's really running away with it. Maybe you could say Michigan State. You got Dartmouth in there, maybe not getting enough love yet, but things are kind of converging to the middle on those top 10 teams. So that's a hard part too. But what are some of the reasons we're seeing maybe things leveling off now?
I'll start with where you were just going. The ballot every week, every Sunday night, putting together a ballot is one of the most difficult things, because you want to respect teams that you know are good, that probably are, that sometimes are just coming off really bad weekends. Boston University for me has been a team that's been really hard to quantify this year. I know that they're good. I know that they have plenty of talent, but I'm concerned about some of their losses. They played a really hard slate as well. There's teams like that out there. Minnesota is a team we've talked about in that. Even Western Michigan, defending national champions, and they've had some real bright lights. I've seen them twice. I've called their games, and I think they're a really good team, but there are parts of their game that concern me right now. In terms of what we're seeing now, and maybe less upsets as the season goes on, I think it's just sometimes you really have to consider the fact that the voters don't know everything early in the season. Now we're actually seeing voters start to make a more educated guess with their ballot each week. That's one of the things that I think is leveling us off.
I would say that there are some times that you could look and you could say, hey, I'll just vote the pairwise. I don't think you can vote the NPI right now at all, because it's crazy. And I know that we don't want to really go there right now, but you got Dartmouth at number 1. If you voted, you got LAU in the top 15. That's one upset that if you really wanted to talk, if there was an upset, I don't think anybody saw LIU going into Minnesota and beating Minnesota. I could have told you I thought LIU was really good, and after we played them, and they are just as good. They beat Merrimack. They took Penn State to overtime. That didn't surprise me. They had them 4-3 down with 10 to go on Saturday night. If they would have swept them, I think the Gopher faithful would have been going crazy in Minneapolis, even more than they already were. But I think it's tough right now. You're still trying to figure everything out. And if you look at all the numbers and the records, and then you go get a little bit crazy and you pull up the NPI and say, let me compare it a little bit. And then you look at that and then you just really don't know what you're talking about because of how crazy that is. So I think that if you use all the data, you're still trying to figure out exactly where polls are going and where they're not. And like you said, they're maybe leveling off because there is enough video on people are starting to look at a couple games back. They're starting to see who the leading scorers are. They're starting to see trends on their power play. They're starting to see trends of how they're doing things. So I think that's maybe a couple different reasons why you're seeing leveling off on that, polls, how difficult it is. And this is for somebody who's not voting on a poll anymore. But I can tell you when I did it, and I haven't done it for a while now, I would look at what I thought were my poll. I would look at a pairwise. I would look at league standings. And that's all difficult right now because also in league standings, like we've only played 4 league games and we're tied with 2 other teams that are played 8 games. So you don't really know that as well. So you're still there's still a whole bunch up in the air.
I mean, I think if we can kind of look at the season to date and say that, the college hockey season has been drunk to date, I think that this week maybe we sat down, had a glass of water, starting to feel a little bit better, and we're thinking about what the rest of the night looks like. I think that we're finally seeing things level off a little bit. And I say that, and now we're going to see the number 1, 2, and 3 teams all lose this week. That's just
you mentioned the NPI, and at some point we're going to see a shakeup in that. And that I think is going to be once teams have played more than 15 games, because you got to have 15 games in the calculation, if I remember correctly. 12. Okay.
12.
Even better.
12.
Okay. So they're just approaching 12. And then after that, they can start taking off wins that hurt you. And so that is going to start kicking in very soon. And once that happens, then I think you'll see things straighten out, quote unquote, or at least look more like they've looked in the past.
I
But
can only hope.
yeah, I mean, it's very strange right now. I wrote last week in our TMQ column that it's going to be a hot mess until semester break or maybe even early in January. And so people have got to get used to it being different. That's why at USCHO, our publisher, Tim Bruley, was reluctant to publish it too early. And that always puts us as a publication in a difficult place because other people are publishing it. But it just did not make a whole lot of sense early on, and you start seeing teams having played one or two games and they're at the top, and teams that have, like a 5-1 record at number 47. It was that kind of weirdness. And so that should settle down. But just like the RPI and just like the pairwise before it, it's the kind of thing where the numbers only really make sense after all the games have been played. They kind of converge into where they should be. Right. And, in the pairwise, generally, the teams that were in the tournament in the pairwise, so to speak, in January, something like 75 or 80% of those would make it. We'll have to see what that looks like with the NPI. Now, people may have modeled out previous seasons and can tell us better, but I'm really just going to sit and wait and maybe take from this season some guidelines that we can apply in other years. This episode has been sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Las Vegas. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 for tickets. We do this not only on audio, but on video. Find us on YouTube at youtube.com/USCHO. Please like and subscribe. Both of those help us out. For Jim Connolly, for Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefsker, and this has been USCHO Weekend Review.